understanding of justice is not built upon some sort of human ideology or philosophy. Our understanding of justice is rooted in revelation. It comes from the Qur'an and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There's a very famous Arabic proverb, al-ashya tu'rafu bi-adadiha, that things are recognized through their opposites. For example, we acknowledge the reality of light when we know darkness. We understand the reality of happiness when we know sadness and sorrow. Similarly, one of the best ways of understanding the reality and essence of justice is understanding its opposite, which is dhulm, which is injustice. So this word dhulm in the Arabic language, it's translated as injustice, oppression, and wrongdoing. Often it's defined as وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي غَيْرِ مَحَلِّهِ, putting something in the wrong place, violating someone's rights unjustly, transgressing the boundaries and limits. This is something that is absolutely unlawful within Islam. There's a hadith Qudsi where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, إِنِّي حَرَّمْتَ الظُّلْمَ عَلَى نَفْسِي, that I have made dhulm, I have made wrongdoing, injustice, oppression, haram, unlawful upon myself. This is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaking. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that He has made dhulm unlawful, haram upon Himself. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by His essence, He is pure and free from ever committing any type of dhulm. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not wrong anyone. وَلَا يَظْلِمُ رَبُّكَ أَحَدًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala does not wrong any human being. إِنَّ اللَّهَ لَا يَظْلِمُ مِثْقَالَ ذَرَّةٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala doesn't wrong anyone, even the amount of an atom's weight. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whatever He decrees, whatever He decides, whatever He wills, is absolutely fair. It's absolutely just. It's we as human beings who wrong each other. It's we as human beings who commit acts of oppression and injustice. And in the same hadith Qudsi, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continues, وَجَعَلْتُهُ بَيْنَكُمْ مُحَرَّمًا فَلَا تَظَالَمُوا, that I have made it unlawful upon you as well, so do not wrong each other. So as human beings, committing any type of dhulm is absolutely forbidden. And the scholars, when they describe dhulm, they highlight these three different categories, three different levels. The first is dhulmun nafs, wronging ourselves, wronging our souls by committing sins and acts of disobedience. When we happen to commit a sin, when we happen to commit an act of disobedience, we are actually wronging ourselves. We are being unjust to our souls. We are being oppressive to our own being. The second category is the dhulm that exists between people. When we violate each other's rights unlawfully and unjustly. When we cause harm, when we cause pain to other human beings. And then there's dhulm to everything around us, to the environment, to the animals, to the plants. All three categories are absolutely prohibited, they are forbidden. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah, he said that this commandment, it encompasses all of Islam. Because everything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made unlawful, everything that He has prohibited is a type of dhulm. And similarly, everything He has commanded, everything that He has ordered is a type of adl. It's a type of justice. So adl is the opposite of dhulm. It can be described as justice, fairness, equity, equality. It's وَضْعُ الشَّيْءِ فِي مَحَلِّهِ. It's putting something in the right place, making sure that we're fulfilling other people's rights, that we're acting fairly, equitably, we're not transgressing the boundaries, we're not transgressing the limits. And every single one of us is responsible for being just to ourselves, by having taqwa, by being people of God consciousness, by trying our best to obey the commandments of Allah, stay away from His prohibitions. We are required to be just to each other, to make sure that we are fulfilling each other's rights. We're not wronging anyone, we're not harming anyone through our speech, through our behavior. That we're not a source of inconvenience, whether it's physically, financially, spiritually, or emotionally. That we're being fair and just to everything around us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, إِنَّ اللَّهَ يَأْمُرُكُمْ أَن تُؤَدُّوا الْأَمَانَاتِ إِلَىٰ أَهْلِهَا وَإِذَا حَكَمْتُمْ بَيْنَ النَّاسِ أَن تَحْكُمُوا بِالْعَدْلِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ نِعِمَّا يَعِظُكُمْ بِهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. That truly Allah commands you to return trust to whom they belong. Be a person of amana. Be a person who feels that responsibility, that burden. And you fulfill that responsibility properly and correctly. And if you happen to judge between people, judge between them with fairness and justice. How beautiful is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands you with. إِنَّ اللَّهَ كَانَ سَمِيعًا بَصِيرًا. And truly Allah, He is the all-seeing, He's the all-hearing. So justice is something that is a desired objective in Islam. Establishing it in all aspects of our lives. And this is something that was understood by the companions radiyallahu anhum. There's a very powerful statement that when the companions came into the Persian Empire, the Persian emperor asked the companions, "What has brought you to our lands? Why have you come here?" And one of them responded, "Allahu bta'athana." Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who has sent us. لِنُخْرِجَ مَنْ شَاءَ مِنْ عِبَادَةِ الْعِبَادِ إِلَى عِبَادَةِ اللَّهِ وَمِنْ ضِيقِ الدُّنْيَا إِلَى سِعَتِهَا وَمِنْ جَوْرِ الْأَدْيَانِ إِلَى عَدْلِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Allah is the one who sent us to remove whomsoever He wills from the worship of creatures to the worship of Allah. To remove them from the narrowness of this world to the expansiveness and the vastness of the hereafter. And to remove them from the oppression of all other ways of life to the justice of Islam. This is a very, very powerful, profound statement. It highlights what our perspective on life is supposed to be. That as believers, one of the reasons why we are here, one of the reasons why we have been created, why we exist, why we're in this current context, is to remove people by the will of Allah from worshiping created things, from worshiping their own selves, their own desires, from worshiping material pursuits, from worshiping false idols and ideologies, and bringing them to the worship and submission of Allah. It's to remove people from the narrowness of this world to the vastness and expansiveness of the hereafter. To remind people that the life of this world is temporary, it's fleeting, it's going to come to an end. Whereas the life of the hereafter is for eternity, it's forever. It is to remove people from injustice and oppression and bring them to the justice of Islam. And the primary mechanism of doing so is al-amru bil-ma'ruf wa-nahyu 'anil munkar. The primary mechanism of fulfilling this objective, this purpose in life, is enjoining and commanding what's good, and then forbidding, preventing, and stopping what is evil. That our deen, it has this collective communal aspect to it. It is not an individualistic way of life. We're not only concerned about ourselves and our own salvation. We are concerned about each other. We're concerned about society at large. And we're supposed to engage in al-amr bil-ma'ruf. Whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala considers to be praiseworthy, healthy, good, wholesome, we are supposed to encourage that. We're supposed to remind people about morality, values, ethics, and principles. وَالنَّهْيُ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ. And we're supposed to stop and prevent and fix and change what's wrong. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, or Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tells us in the Qur'an that this is the defining quality of this ummah. He praises us for this. كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ. That you are the best community, you are the best people that has been brought forth for mankind, because you enjoin what's good, because you forbid what's evil, and you believe in Allah. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, our Lord, our Creator, He's praising us. He's praising the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam because of this one quality. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, you enjoin what's good. وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ, and you prevent and stop and change what's wrong. وَتُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ, and you truly believe in Allah. The Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam told us, مَنْ رَأَى مِنْكُمْ مُنْكَرًا فَلْيُغَيِّرْهُ بِيَدِهِ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِلِسَانِهِ فَمَنْ لَمْ يَسْتَطِعْ فَبِقَلْبِهِ وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. That whoever among you sees something munkar, when you see something evil, wrong, prohibited, unlawful, inappropriate, immoral, then change it with your hand. If you're unable to do so, then with your tongue. And if you're unable to do so, then at least dislike it in your heart. And that is the weakest level, that is the weakest expression of iman, of faith. So in this hadith, the Prophet ﷺ, he's giving us 3 avenues of engaging in al-amr bil-ma'ruf wa-nahy 'anil munkar. 3 avenues of establishing adl, of establishing justice. That if we see something wrong, we are supposed to try to change it physically. We're supposed to be proactive. If we have the ability, if we have the capacity, if we have the authority, if we have the right, then we're supposed to do something physical to stop, to prevent, and change that evil. If we're unable to do so, because maybe there's a fear of negative repercussions, there's a fear of harming ourselves, or there's a fear of creating greater harm in the society, then we should at least speak out against it. We should at least raise our voices, build awareness, because speech is very powerful. Sometimes speech can be more effective than action. As the Prophet ﷺ told us, أَفْضَلُ الْجِهَادِ كَلِمَةُ حَقٍّ عِنْدَ سُلْطَانٍ جَائِرٍ. That the most virtuous type of jihad, the best type of striving and struggling, is to speak the truth in front of a tyrant. Is to speak truth to power. If we're even unable to do that, then we still dislike that evil within our hearts. We have this hatred and disgust towards it. وَذَلِكَ أَضْعَفُ الْإِيمَانِ. But that is the weakest expression, that is the weakest manifestation of one's iman. We should never ever become desensitized to sin, to immorality, to wrongdoing. If we can't do something physically, we can't do something vocally, then we should still hate that thing and dislike it within our hearts. So these are 3 avenues. These are 3 methods of bringing about adl, of bringing about justice, of helping remove people from the worship of other things to the worship of Allah. To remove people from the narrowness and restrictedness of this dunya to the vastness of the akhirah. And to remove people from the injustice, the oppression, the wrongdoing of all other ways of lives and systems, and bringing them to the justice of Islam. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give all of us the tawfiq, the ability to do so. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who are praised by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for enjoining what's right, forbidding what's evil, and believing in Allah. أقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله لي ولكم ولسائر المسلمين فاستغفروه فإنه هو الغفور الرحيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسولنا وبعد. All thanks and praise are due to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and may His peace and blessings be upon His last and final messenger. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to accept our good deeds. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala overlook our mistakes, our faults and shortcomings. I want to address a very sensitive topic. And because it's so sensitive, I want to be very careful and selective with my words. So I am going to read what I have prepared. So a few days ago, we were informed of extremely horrific and shocking allegations of criminal misconduct, of abuse of the most despicable nature involving a religious figure. And these alleged criminal actions, they represent a profound betrayal of trust, breaching the fundamental values of our faith, of our community. And it goes without saying that we firmly and resolutely condemn these alleged actions, and we are committed to upholding the principles of adl. We are committed to upholding the principles of justice according to the Qur'an and Sunnah. And since the news broke, there have been a lot of discussions and online discussions regarding this matter. And a lot of the discussions, a lot of the conversations, they are very emotionally charged, and rightfully so. All of us should be afforded the time and space to experience and process our feelings. But because these conversations are emotional, sometimes they end up missing the point from a truly Islamic lens. And they end up focusing on secondary and tertiary issues. So I want to help us bring the conversations into focus. Number one, it is a very unfortunate reality that people of knowledge, religious figures, they are not immune from the influences of shaitan. And they also have the capacity to commit unspeakable sins. Having knowledge, having ilm, being in a position of authority and leadership does not make one immune from sins and transgression. And of course, people of knowledge, religious figures, scholars, imams, are expected to act according to their knowledge. And they're held to a higher moral standard. And that's why when allegations like this are brought to light, it causes extra hurt. It causes extra disappointment. It causes anger and frustration. Right? There's a common saying, the slip of the scholar is like the slip for the entire community, because it has that communal impact. That how can a person who conveys and teaches the words of Allah and His Messenger violate and betray those words? So sinning, committing acts of disobedience and wrong, they are human problems. Humans are imperfect, and the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is perfect. The deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and its knowledge is not tainted by the defects, faults, and transgressions of humans. The deen of Allah is perfect, people are not. We should not tie our deen to a personality. Our deen should be tied to the message. It should be tied and connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Number two, our institutions, masajid, Islamic centers, schools, and seminaries are required and expected to create an environment that ensures everyone's physical, emotional, religious, and spiritual safety. So through various policies, codes, regulations, and training, they should actively prevent abuse. They should actively prevent harassment and misconduct. And it's very important to remember that these policies, regulations, codes of conduct, and trainings, they are preventative. They are barriers. And it's unfortunate that someone may still break those barriers and be guilty of violations. And the burden of that violation, the burden of that transgression, it lies on the shoulders of the individual. We do not believe in collective guilt. That's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says regarding the Day of Judgment, وَلَا تَزِرُ وَازِرَةٌ وِزْرَ أُخْرَى, that no guilty soul bears the burden of another. If someone is found guilty of criminal misconduct, abuse, or harassment, they do not represent you or I, any more than a terrorist from our family does, or a criminal from our community does. Number three, we need to learn how to protect ourselves spiritually, emotionally, and physically. And one aspect of that spiritual protection is attaching ourselves to the message of the Qur'an, attaching ourselves to the message of the Sunnah, nurturing and developing a strong relationship with Allah and love for His Messenger sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and not attaching ourselves to the conveyor of that message. None of us are immune from sin. None of us have isma. Only the prophets and messengers had isma. They were protected, they were saved from committing acts of sin and disobedience. Ibn Mas'ud radiyallahu anhu powerfully stated, "Man kana mustannan falyastan biman qad mat." That whoever follows someone's way, they should follow the way of one who has passed away. فَإِنَّ الْحَيَّ لَا تُؤْمَنُ عَلَيْهِ الْفِتْنَةِ. Because the living, they are not safe, they are not secure from trials and tribulations. So as role models, as examples, we have the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We have the Sahaba radiyallahu anhum. We have the great scholars and heroes of the past as role models and examples to follow. In terms of physical protection, right, we should always keep ourselves cautious. We should always be careful, and we should teach that same caution to our children. You know, the rules of gender engagement and gender interaction, they exist for a reason. Sometimes people look at these rules and think they're archaic. They're for a past society, a past time and place. There is deep divine wisdom in these regulations that exist. Right? We should make sure that we are never isolated with someone from the opposite gender, whether physically or even virtually. We have to learn how to keep our barriers up, and we need to teach our children these barriers as well. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to keep all of us safe and protected. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow all of us to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wasallam. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect us from ever slipping and making mistakes and faults and acts of sins and disobedience. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala protect our communities, protect our children, protect our iman. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to make all of us among the people of Adl. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those who enjoin good and forbid evil. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to save us and protect us from committing dhulm or from being wronged and oppressed. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to help all the Muslims that are struggling throughout the world. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ease their pain and suffering. May He give them patience and steadfastness. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to continue to help the people of Gaza. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give them strength, fortitude, patience, perseverance. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bring an end to the genocide, the ethnic cleansing. May He bring an end to this brutal occupation. May He return Al-Aqsa to the believers. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala heal anyone who's been hurt. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive anyone who's passed away. Give them the highest ranks in paradise, patience to their families. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless us and accept all of our good deeds. Inna Allah wa malaikatahu yusalluna ala nabi. Ya ayyuha alladhina amanu sallu alayhi wa sallimu taslima. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala ali Muhammad. كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار. ربنا ظلمنا أنفسنا وإن لم تغفر لنا وترحمنا لنكونن من الخاسرين. ربنا إننا آمنا فاغفر لنا ذنوبنا وقنا عذاب النار. اللهم حبب إلينا الإيمان وزينه في قلوبنا وكره إلينا الكفر والفسوق والعصيان واجعلنا من الراشدين. اللهم تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم. عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. فاذكروني أذكركم واشكروا لي ولا تكفرون. أقم الصلاة.